The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for today's webinar. This is Robert Jakowski with On Demand Advisors. It's a pleasure to have you join us today. Today, what we're going to talk about is how to engineer predictable revenue growth for 2024. So I want to walk through that with you today because if you think about revenue growth, it should be, number one, predictable. It should be scalable. It should be intentional, meaning you want to get the types of companies, customers, and markets that you're looking for. It should be capital efficient. So how do you make sure that when you spend $1 in marketing, you're going to get $20 in return in terms of sales and revenue? If you look at proven, we're going to talk about today some of our clients that have proven this out, the methodology, the best practices that we're talking with you about today. And it should be across all channels. So you've heard omni-channel, meaning direct sales, working with partners, indirect sales, working in terms of self-service through self-service websites. All these are different markets and channels that you have to work with at your disposal. It's important to leverage all those intelligently, and that's what we're going to talk about today. So as we've done with every webinar, we encourage you to post any questions that you have today, and we'll make sure that we address the questions and share the responses as we do polls today and questions with the entire attendees. So we appreciate all input. We appreciate your input as far as questions, and look forward to getting back with you very quickly on any answers that you need. So why don't we start off today with a question? And here's a good question. So when you're thinking about this year, entering the new year, what is your revenue growth for this year? And let me go ahead and bring up some of the options that you could respond to. And we'll launch that. So if you'd be kind enough to give us your input, I appreciate that. So one goal would be to grow revenue 10% year over year compared to 2023, 25%, 50%, 100%, or keep revenue the same as last year. So go ahead and we'll share the output from all of you today as we're going through our session today. And really, when we think about this, let's say your goal is 50% revenue growth year over year. We're going to discuss the practical, proven way to implement this program that we're talking about today so that you can achieve that 50% growth year over year. Okay, I'll just give it another second or two for everybody to weigh in and appreciate the response. Okay, let me go ahead and share this. A number of you said 10%, 50%, and 100%. 57% of you stated that you'd like to grow revenue by 25% year over year. So that's great. We appreciate that. Now, what I'd like to talk about today is growing revenue requires the right operating model. And so when we think about a lot of the CEOs I know, thousands of CEOs that I've worked with, a lot of times what I look at is they're looking for that silver bullet. They're looking for the right program. They're looking for the right show. They're looking for the right event. They're looking for something that they consider to be the silver bullet. And from my background, having done this for many years, I don't think there's a silver bullet, but there is an operating model that you can implement at your company to actually make this happen. And that's what we're showing here in this infographic. So a couple of things on this, if you've seen this before, the first funnel is marketing. The second is lead conversion. And the third is sales, put simply to that. And what happens today is if you think you want to grow revenue by 50% year over year, and we'll walk through an example, let's say that is $8 million of additional revenue that you're looking for. We're going to go through the mathematical model on how you get from here to there in what we call revenue engineering. Now, 1 and 2 is in purple. That's all strategic. That's really the setup for the strategy for your company. Red is marketing. We're going to be talking about putting in a revenue acceleration engine for every market, for every target industry, or vertical that you're working with. And you're going to find that this is incredibly important in terms of scaling and winning that individual market. Yellow is all about sales. And sales has changed a lot over the past several years. And I've had the good fortune of building some tremendous sales driven organizations in the past. But what I would say today is that with the advent of subscription services and different price points, it's more important now than ever that you implement the right models and do that so you're profitable and have velocity when it comes to sales. And then finally, green over here is an area that we help a lot of companies think about, and that is your partner ecosystem. How do you leverage that ecosystem? So this map that you see here, this operating model, we actually implemented this model at a company called Intact. Intact is a leader in the SaaS financial application space, and we partnered with Mark Benioff and Salesforce as we went to market. So if somebody wanted CRM and other front office applications, we were the back office for them. So we partnered together. We went to market together with them. We sold directly, and we were very successful in terms of building out our direct sales model. But we also had 300 different sell-through partners that enabled us to get 50% of our revenue through the channel. So this model is something that we created at Intact, and now we've perfected this model with hundreds of companies. Now, for those of you that are joining us today, I would share with you that what we're going to talk about today works for you if you're a startup company and you're just getting going. It's going to work for you if you're a mid-stage company and you need to scale and grow. And it will work for you if you're a global public company. So these are important best practices that we're going to share with you today. And we look forward to doing that. So let's talk about this. Our agenda for today is how do you engineer your revenue growth for this year? Well, the first thing is start with strategy and your goals. And we're going to dig into each of these areas a little bit further. The second is showing you revenue engineering. How do you actually engineer your revenue growth? What's the model that you're going to follow to actually make this happen and manifest the results you're looking for? So it's not a wish, it's not a promise, it's known practice, best practices in terms of how to do this. We're going to talk about how you implement your engine for each market. The engine enables you to go win that market. That market could be healthcare. That market could be financial services. That market could be SMBs of a certain size or orientation. In today's webinar, we're also going to benchmark success. So we're going to give you 3 examples of clients that we've applied this with, where we've successfully partnered with them at a strategic level, as well as a tactical level, to help them achieve the goals that they set out at the beginning of the engagement. And then finally, we'll talk about potential next steps you can take from today's webinar. Okay, so let's start with the first area. Start with strategy. Well, all of us are thinking about, as we did in the chat that we had, or the poll, what do we want to do from a number perspective? And let's say your goal is 25% growth year over year in terms of revenue. And that's good, it's a number. The question isn't typically for most of us that we have a number in mind. The question is, can we execute to make that number real? And so when we think about this from a strategy perspective, we look at a number of different lenses or venues. One is, what customers do you want this year? So what type of customers do you want? All customers are not created equal. Some customers are highly profitable. Some customers are going to use your services and solutions in terms of their totality or their total value. Those are the customers we all want. Another thing that you look at is, with your plan, how do you overcome obstacles, or what I call ceilings? There are a lot of companies, for instance, that can reach up to $5 million, but struggle to get from 5 to 10. And there are a lot of companies that get to $10 million that struggle on how to get to 25, and so forth. So there are obstacles and ceilings that you hit as you look at moving forward. It's important to call those obstacles out and realize that they have to be vanquished. Another thing when you think about your strategy and goals is leveraging best practices. We're going to share many of those with you today. And keep in mind, since we've been doing this, Craig and I founded this company, Craig Remy and I founded this company uh, 14 years ago. We've worked with hundreds of B2B companies. So we're very serial at what we bring to the table in terms of best practices. And we're always refining them, always updating them, always making sure that they are the most relevant information and techniques that we can share with you today. And then connecting the dots. When we think about this, you start off with a strategy. Strategy could be, I want to win this market. I want to be in a situation where I have this customer sat score of 98% with our customers. I want to win these type of customers because they're the most profitable selective accounts we're looking for. I want these lighthouse accounts. Whatever the strategy is, the next thing is to put together the plan or the playbook or the best practices. Then it's execution, and then it's accountability. So that's how we start thinking about strategy and goals. Now what I like to do is talk a little bit about putting in marketing excellence. What you all need is an engine. And we really have talked about an engine when we talk about going after a specific market. Some of you may be going after a horizontal market. Some of you may be going after a very specific market like oil and gas. Some of you may be going after a very specific market in terms of design firms, for instance. I know, for instance, one of the companies that's here today does UX, UI work for clients. And we've worked with companies like this in the past, where you're actually working with companies and going out and helping them really substantially improve their interface and the customer experience. So let's talk about this engine. As with any engine, there are a number of components that go into this engine. If you want to go win a market and scale and put in that engine to scale, you've got to do 9 things. And this is what we do. We help our clients put in 9 things to go do this. And so what we're going to do is we're going to walk you through all 9 of these because as you would expect with an engine, you need to do all 9. If you miss 1 or 2, then the engine doesn't perform. It doesn't scale. It may not even start. So let's talk about these areas. The first one is being intentional about what is the revenue growth goals that you have for the company. We call this revenue engineering. And we're going to talk about a number of different vectors here. And vectors are different vectors for revenue growth. The first one that we're all familiar with is new customer acquisition. We're all looking for new customers. Now, I took those 3 funnels that we just talked about. The first one is marketing. So that's lead generation. How do you create these market qualified leads? The second one is lead conversion or lead development. How do you convert those market qualified leads, in this case 1,600, into 160 sales qualified leads, which, by the way, 10% is typical for B2B companies. And then the third funnel, which we're all familiar with, is your CRM funnel, your sales funnel. And that's where you're converting sales qualified leads, sales opportunities into actual transactions. So if we look at an average transaction value of $100,000 for that service or that solution, then obviously you know you need 40 of them. So what we look at is, what do you have to do to make that happen? Well, to make that happen, we need to create 1,600 market qualified leads, convert those into 160 sales opportunities, and then convert those 160 sales opportunities into 40 customers or 40 transactions. And then you can break that down on a month-to-month basis. So this is what we call revenue engineering. It's the backbone of what you need to do. When we help clients put this in, we are looking at having a very measurable, objective way of looking at how we're making progress toward these goals. The second revenue vector that we're all familiar with is customer expansion. So if you're like one of our customers that has 911 customers, then that company basically is saying, well, for all the customers that we have today, are we maximizing the opportunity to sell additional solutions and services to our customers? And in most cases, the answer is no. If you are bringing in new services, for instance, perhaps to help your customers with better utilization, of their solution that they have from you today, then you've got to look at how many of those 911 customers are actually using your service today. So the customer upsell, cross sell, customer expansion is really important. And this is another area that most companies could do a much better job in terms of getting their revenue share from here. The third area or revenue vector is channel partners, channel sales. These are traditionally sell-through partners that you can work with. Now, sell with partners, like we had at Salesforce, where we sold together with them, but they didn't actually sell our solutions on their paper. In that case, that would be in the first set of funnels, which is new customer acquisition. In this case, it's about having partners that can take your solution to market. Typically, they could take that to market as a reseller. They could take that to market as a VAR, value-added reseller, or they could take that to market as a embedded or OEM partner, like we had at Intact. So here's where you can get another $1.5 million. But what I'm showing you here today is looking at different revenue vectors to get to what you want to get to, which is your $8 million number. So the last one that we have down here is new markets, services, or solutions. Now, a lot of companies that we work with, when we begin working with them, are always bringing new products and services to market. The challenge is they're not getting the revenue growth that they're looking from those new services or new products that they have. So one of the things that we do is focus on the launch. What happens 6 weeks to 8 weeks before the launch? What happens at the launch? And then how do you ensure that all of the people interested in that solution or service are followed up by sales and they're equipped with the right tools? So we've had some great success on making sure that companies that are putting their investment into R&D for new products or services or partnerships to resell are getting that accretive revenue that they're looking for. So that's the first component of your engine. The second is migrating to what we call outcome-focused messaging. Most companies have done a really good job talking about what their service or solution is, what it does, what are the benefits, the advantages, and so forth. And that's typically what you find in terms of the first area here. The second level, though, as far as elevation for most of us, is moving to what are the business challenges that you're going to help your customer address, and what's the value that you're going to provide by helping them address that solution. So it's the aspirin and the headache. So the headache is the pain and the business challenge. The aspirin is your service, your solution. And that's good. That's a good next evolution. But to move that up to the next area, which is how do you help them optimize a business process? So that business process could be supply chain, for instance. You may be involved in terms of, there's a company I know that does spend management. So you're helping them manage all of their spend that they have across their company that they have today. And that really requires helping them manage that entire end-to-end process. So if you can show them how they're going to optimize that process, that is of tremendous strategic value for them. The fourth area, which is typically the highest in terms of value for your client and outcomes, is what are the outcomes you're going to actually help them deliver? So level one was, what about your solution? Level two is the challenge you help them solve. Level three is the business process you help them optimize. And level four, which is the most important, is what is the way that you're going to enable them to achieve the outcomes that they want? And most importantly, the ROI that they're looking for. So this is the second component of the engine that we talk about. The third is gaining buyer intelligence and validation. This one is really fascinating for most of us because I don't know about you, but the question would be how many of you do routine surveys of your prospects, not your customers, but your prospects, to understand what's important to them. So we've been very fortunate at On-Demand Advisors. We've done hundreds of these surveys. We call the buyer intelligence surveys. And what we do is we figure out what are the challenges that you want to test? What are the the value or solutions that you want to test? What are the offers you want to test with a target audience? Wouldn't it be great to have 50 or 100 decision makers in your target audience answering the survey for you? Because when you do that, it validates everything that you want and it prioritizes how you're going to use that. So these surveys help us decide what the truth is. Let's say you're going after a specific market. Let's say that market is healthcare, and let's say you're working with um, a very decided area like finance. You're working with the financial area in healthcare. So you want to talk to a lot of CFOs, and you want to really understand what are the challenges that they have today. What are the drivers for decisions that they're making? What are the value propositions that you offer, and how important are they to them? When you start getting all this information back from them, it gives you the validation, and you move from assumptions to what I call the truth. Once you have that, you can start creating the messaging and the engagement vehicles for your target audience. It's just a really powerful way to eliminate a lot of experimentation. The fourth component of this revenue acceleration engine that we talk about is reaching 100% of your target audience. Now, the question for many people is why? Why do I need to reach that 100%? And here's why. In every given year, 3 to 5% of your target audience is going to invest in your type of service or solution today. What we don't know is which 3 or 5%. So one of the things that we're really about when we think about this component of your revenue acceleration engine is having a path to your reach. So you want to get to 100% reach, if not now, over time. And there are actually some very good vehicles to help you do that. And we use all of them when we're working with clients. So we may use a Zoom info database, and we'll figure out what are the NAICS codes that we're going to go after to reach your target decision makers, your audience, and so forth. The fifth area is one of the areas that probably is just like a database most overlooked, and that's what we call revenue acceleration infrastructure. So most companies we know, since we've been in software forever, use a marketing automation system, use a CRM system, albeit they may use it poorly because many of us turn these systems on, but we don't implement them with best practices in mind. So in many cases, when we get involved with clients and we're helping them put in their engine or tune up their engine, it's about looking at what they're currently used today for these areas and to basically optimize that for their company, optimize that for their engagement that they have. This last one around sales enablement is something that we're helping companies put in today. We call it One Source, and we have every month we have different webinars on this. But this solution, One Source, enables you to put all of the sales tools, all of the engagement vehicles with customers and partners and prospects into one place, and to organize them around the buying process that you have for every group. This dramatically improves sales performance and collaboration that you have today. Let's talk about, and by the way, this is an example of that. One of our customers is Technical Toolboxes, and we've helped them create all of these vehicles that they use today to engage their audience, like a buyer's guide, like an ROI guide, like a video testimonial, like a video presentation, explainer video, like a thought leadership webinar, as an example, like a process infographic, where they're going in and helping look at different engineering processes that they actually help optimize for oil and gas companies. So all of these get put into One Source, and then you can start filtering and organizing them through the advanced content filtering that is offered with this type of solution. It's a great way to move your sales team from where they're at today, which is sales teams actually can spend up to 2/3 of their time doing things other than face-to-face selling. So what you really want to do is you want to unlock that time and give that time back to the sales team so that they can spend more time face-to-face selling with prospects and customers. Let's talk about the sixth area of this engine. One of the things that we're very keen to do with many of our clients is to map out the buyer's journey. For your buyer today, what's the journey that they want to go through in terms of evaluating your service or solution? And then how do you enable that? It's really important to do that because the better you understand that journey, the better you can facilitate and accelerate that journey. The seventh is what we call buyer engagement. So if we take that journey and we put some steps in here and we say, well, the first is outreach. They've got to know who you are. The second, obviously, is you've got to develop that marketing opportunity or marketing lead into something greater, which is developing, working with your champion, giving them the tools that they need. And then it's about qualifying them. Then it's about providing proof, proposing, negotiating, and closing. Now, what you'll see along the journey here is buyer engagement vehicles. So at the very beginning, they may need a company overview of who your company is or your solution overview. If they haven't purchased this type of solution or invested in this type of solution before, they may need a buyer's guide. So these are the things that you need to anticipate. And we'd love to create these offers because they really are important for the buyer, but they're also important for the sales team too. And so the seventh area of building this engine is buyer engagement vehicles. The next one, the eighth, is making sure you've got the right channels. So one of the things that typically comes out of the survey is really focusing on what are the right channels to reach your buyers. Some channels are going to be more effective than others. So in this case, for instance, email campaigns may be something important to you. Executive outreach, doing a lot of work around social and the different social platforms could be of really strong importance, especially LinkedIn if you're selling B2B. Thought leadership or customer webinars is another great area. In-person events. Again, just like we talked with the product launch, one of the most important things that you'll find, and most companies do in-person events today now that COVID has been abated, is how do you ensure you maximize your investment in that event? So if I go to an event, and let's say that event is Association of Cost Engineers, the question I have is, what do I do before that event? How do I reach all the attendees? How do I engage them when I'm at that event? And then afterwards, how do I continue that engagement to move that interest into the sales opportunities? And then finally, the last component in this engine, this most important engine that you can put in for every market, is measuring conversions and ROI. And so we've spent a lot of time, and Craig and the team has spent a lot of time helping our clients really think through how do you actually evaluate the right places to invest and divest as you look at this over time. One of the CEOs that we worked with, Jeff Grill at Junction Solutions, when we began working with him, he says, hey, Bob and Craig, if there's one thing you guys can help me with, I spend a lot of money in marketing. I just don't understand how that translates into sales outcomes. So help me figure that ROI. Help me understand that. And that's what we helped him do. Now, before we move on to the next area, I wanted to stop for a second and just say, you've got the strategy. Now, for the strategy is being intentional about what markets you want to win, what personas you want to reach, and if you can put the engine in place for each of those markets, you now have a definitive way to go scale and win those markets. And that's the key. Go win markets. So one of the companies that we work with is a company called AvidXchange. And I'm going to walk you through 3 customer examples that would be helpful in terms of understanding the application of what we just talked about. When we began working with AvidXchange, and AvidXchange is a financial software company focused on accounts payable automation, invoice presentment, and e-commerce, e-payment solutions. So when we began working with them, they were selling into one vertical for 13 years. And they've been successful. They built the company up to $6.5 million. And one of the things that we did when we began working with them is we looked at creating a strategy to go win that market. And this case was property management companies. And so we put that engine in place for the property management companies. We helped them reach 100% of the target market, engage with them. We found out through doing some surveys that they were not hitting on all the right cylinders in terms of messaging. So we changed their messaging. We helped them go win that market. And once we helped them do that, we used the same approach in terms of putting an engine in for 6 additional markets. And so that was incredibly transformational for the company. Now, why was that transformational? Because when we talked to Mike Prager, the CEO, he plainly said, hey guys, come in here and help us figure out how to double revenue every year going forward. And so over 4 years of engaging with them, and by the way, our typical engagement is 3 years, we work with Mike and the team to actually help them go from $6.5 million in the first year in revenue to $65 million in year 4. So exactly what Mike wanted to do, putting the engine in place, making sure we're doing this in a capital efficient way each step of the way. So that's a great example of a financial software company. Let's talk about a services company, because some of you may be asking yourselves, does this methodology apply to services companies? And it surely does. Here's a company called ICUC. So ICUC is a global social media management services company. When you think about social and you think about how social gets done, if you're a big company like Novartis, Google, Macy's, Starbucks, all these are customers of ICUC. So when they're going to connect with their customers through the social channels, somebody has to be there that does that. Somebody has to be the team. And ICUC is that team. Because most companies have a couple people that do social, but they don't have the team that's going to fill out the ranks. And so when we began working with ICUC, the Chief Performance Officer, Ray White, but who, by the way, is on our website on a video, he actually came to one of our webinars like today, and he said, you know, guys, I need to grow revenue by 50% year over year. And can you guys help supplement what we're currently doing today and figure out how to take us there? And that's exactly what we did, is we helped work with his team, with his organization to do that. And what was interesting in social, and every company is different in terms of what are the drivers, is we found out that if I'm at Starbucks, I want to know about best practices socially with other food and beverage companies. I don't want to find out in general what other companies are doing in terms of social. I want to find out what is the best practices in my industry. So what we ended up doing with them is we helped them penetrate 12 industries and then build that engine, put an engine in place for each of those industries. And again, that was transformative for them too. Let's talk about one more example. Technical Toolboxes, headquartered in Houston, Texas. And Technical Toolboxes is a provider of engineering performance management solutions and in the oil and gas industry. And so when we began working with them, one of the goals that they had was, let's figure out how to go from $5 to $10 million in revenue. And so when we began working with them, there were a lot of things that weren't in place. And we systematically helped them put that in place, put the foundation in place, the best practices, and then scale and make that happen. And so this is just another example of growing the revenue stream 25% year over year. So in these 3 examples that we just walked through, one company wanted to grow revenue by 25% year over year, which we helped them do, and was actually acquired at the end of the process by a private equity firm. The second company, ICUC, wanted to grow by 50%, and we helped them do that year over year. And then AvExchange wanted to do the same, which is grow by 100% year over year, and we helped them do that. At the end of that process of helping them go to a $65 million company, Bain Capital came in and put $250 million into the company. And then later in 2011, AvExchange actually went public. So they're traded on the NASDAQ. So let's talk about next steps here. So what are the next steps you could take from today? Well, one of the things I talked about earlier is strategy. And one of the things that we help our clients do is put in what we call a playbook. You can think of the playbook as a blueprint, a roadmap. Uh, it is the definitive way to think about how you could get from here to there. So if your goal is to get 25 million, 25% growth year over year, or 50% or more, you probably need a playbook on how to do that. And so when we help our clients put in playbooks, and we've done this again many times with our clients, we help identify a number of things in a playbook. And think about if you were going to create a playbook yourself. So the first thing you start off with is, what's the strategy? What are the strategic things you want to do in 2024 and beyond? Let's say over the next 3 years, and get those down. The next thing is identifying what are the best markets and the personas, titles that you want to reach, influence, and win over the next 2 to 3 years. And then thinking through who are the best companies or organizations that you want to go after. It could be, let's say, one of your targets is not-for-profits. And under not-for-profits, you may say you're going to go after behavioral companies that work with behaviors, so human behavior. And by the way, we've got a company that does that we work with. And so the goal for them is to reach 100% of the not-for-profits, engage the executive directors in a strategic way, and really make sure that they've got the right messaging. One of the things I find that is always important is moving from what we call the nice to have to must have. If you offer a service today, some companies may perceive that as a nice to have. But if we do this right, for instance, outcome-based messaging, instead of talking about the service, we start thinking about what's the ROI that they can achieve with your solution or service. If we do that, we can move this into the must-have category. The reason that's important is that when you're competing for funding within a company for your service or solution, you want to make sure that you're top of the list. You want to make sure that of the 10 things that they could fund in 2024, this is going to be one of the top things that they're going to do. The next is focusing on what makes your company valuable. So one of the things that we find when we help companies scale and grow is creating value within the company. Now, if you're a software company, for instance, the value may be in the intellectual property that you created. And that's fine, that's good. But there are other ways to create value too. For instance, the value may be your distribution system. The value may be the recurring revenue stream that you have. The value may be that the contribution that you can give. One of the companies that we worked with at Technical Toolboxes, it was really important to not only do top line growth, but also help them achieve the contribution that the owners were looking for each and every year. So being lean and mean, but being very efficient in terms of how to scale growth. And then being able to segment your offerings by customer type. This is one of the other important things you can get out of a playbook when you're doing this. Now, most of you may be familiar with the technology adoption curve. And if you look at the adoption curve, there are early adopters, there is the early majority, late majority, and laggards. That's true with every product or service out there today. So when you start thinking about how to segment your customers by type, you start thinking about what's the right engagement, the right services, the right way to work with that customer. So for instance, early adopters maybe just say, give me the solution, let me try it out, let me work with it, let me mold it to what I want. Early majority customers may say, come in here, I need the solution, but I want you to implement that for best practices. Laggards or late majority may say, I don't want the solution, I just want the service. And I want you to actually provide the service to me, implement this, but just give me the outcomes. So those are really good examples of different customer types. So when we engage a company and help them create their playbook, like the playbook for 2024 and beyond, it's typically a 6-week process that we go through with them. And I get this question asked many times, what is the process you go through. So typically, what we do in the beginning is we put an NDA in place, and we ask for everything, including the kitchen sink, because we love to see where you've been, where you are, where you're headed. That way, we can start understanding the business through your eyes. Then the first week is talking about strategy. What is your strategy? What's your strategy for growth? What's your strategy to win markets? What's your strategy to build your company? What's your strategy to be a thought leader? The second area is marketing. What are you doing in marketing and demand generation to actually scale and grow, build your brand, build the demand, build the leads, affect your markets? The third area is sales. How do you sell? Do you sell direct? Do you sell indirect? What do you do to equip your sales organization so that they're successful? What do you do to make sure that they're onboarded correctly and that they have all the tools that they need? What do you do to feed that sales organization and ensure that they have more than enough leads so that they have opportunities to go close and make their numbers? In week 5, we look at creating the playbook. And then in week 6, we present the playbook and the best practices. So that's a little bit about how we think about doing this. So the objective of today's webinar, as we went through this, was to help share with you best practices on how you can engineer your revenue growth for 2024 and do that successfully. So again, just to recap, start with strategy and your goals. And one of the things I found most interesting in my career is in the earlier days, I would work for a lot of venture-backed companies. And what I found a lot of times working with the venture partners, they were great at saying, we want you to double revenue year over year. And there was really no rhyme or reason about why they came up with double the revenue. What was great about that is it forced me to think about how to engineer the company to get there. And that is really critical. Too many executives I work with today are thinking about looking at growth over where they've been as opposed to growth about where they want to go. And so the key here is to focus on where you want to go. The second thing we talked about is engineering your revenue growth and doing the 3 funnels we talked about for each market, for customers, for partners, for new solutions. The third thing we talked about is implementing an engine for each market. So you can have, let's say you had 3 different markets you were selling to. For instance, that UX UI company that we help scale and grow, they were focusing on 3 markets. They focused on software, medical devices, and financial services. And so what we needed to do with them is put in 3 engines, one for each of those markets, so that they could scale, grow, and win each of those markets. Finally, we talked about benchmarking your success. It's really important to make sure that this is capital efficient, it's getting you the results you're looking for, and the revenue engineering model works for your company. And then finally, we talked about potential next steps. So in a nutshell, for today, I wanted to share with you those thoughts. And now what I'd like to do is open this up for questions. So if you'd be kind enough, I'll take one more poll here, and then we'll open it up for your questions. So here's today, when you think about today's webinar, what's your takeaway from today? So some of you may say, my biggest takeaway is I want to apply revenue engineering to my addressable markets. You may want to create a revenue acceleration engine for each of your markets. You may want to apply some of these revenue growth best practices to your company as you're heading into this year. You may want to go ahead and get help focusing on some of your biggest revenue growth challenges. Or you may want to focus on sales and say, hey, our biggest challenge that we have here is improving sales conversions and performance. So go ahead, if you could, take a few moments, and we'll keep the polls open here, and go ahead and weigh in on your thoughts. And I'll share with you some thoughts here as far as what the results are. But all these are important. The question really gets down to, from your perspective, is which one is most important to you today? What I found being a CEO is it's kind of akin to having a fire truck. And there's always going to be a fire every day when you come in as CEO. The question is, where's the fire today that you've got to put out? It could be in R&D, it could be in finance, it could be in sales, it could be in marketing, it could be in services, it could be someplace else. So the question always gets down to is, where's the urgent thing that you need to address today going into this year? Okay, so thank you very much for that. So just to share with you, the biggest go-getter here is creating a revenue acceleration engine for each of your markets. That's probably the biggest takeaway that you have from today. And then everybody else is pretty evenly distributed across the other areas. So applying revenue engineering to your addressable audience, applying some of these revenue growth best practices to your company, getting focused on some of your biggest issues today, and improving sales conversions. Okay, so let's go ahead. Let's do this. Let's open this up for questions that you may have today. And please post your questions. I'll be happy to address them today and look forward to it. Okay, this first question is, how do I choose the right content and channels? That's good. Good question. So a lot of times when you think about choosing the right channels, let me just start there. A lot of times people choose channels not because they have done the right type of validation as far as which channels are the right for their audience, but they just choose channels. So for instance, one company we work with, they decided to get into social media. And they did that because the son of the CEO just graduated from college. So they thought it would be great to have him focus on social. And that's good, but everything is a trade-off, as you would expect. So focusing in on just the right channels for that audience is really important to think about that and to validate that through the survey process. So good question. Appreciate that. Okay, what's the next question? Here's a question. How do you work with an existing team? So that's a great question. So in many cases, there may be people already in place today. When we work with ICUC, there was already a marketing team in place today. So we complemented that team. Our team, which is a sizable team, is broken across 4 different areas. So we've got a marketing team, we've got a strategy team, we've got a team that does sales enablement, and we have a team that does partners and strategic partnerships. And when we look at working with a typical client, we often don't know where they have a need. In fact, a lot of times we start with a playbook first because we've got to figure out where do you have need, where do you have gaps, where do you have issues, so those could be addressed holistically to help you scale and grow revenue for the company. So that's a good question. So in the case of ICUC, we complemented their team. In the case of AdvanceXchange, they didn't have a marketing department when we began working with them. So we were their marketing department for all of their tactical and strategic marketing initiatives that they had in place. So just building that out. But here's the key. As you think about this year and you think about engineering your revenue growth, you've got a number in mind, you need a plan, and then you need to execute. At the end of the day, no excuses, right? It's about putting the plan in place, executing it, and making it real. So that's really something that we love to work with you on and help you be successful in. Okay, so let's see if there's any other questions. I already took care of this one question, which is how does a playbook get implemented? And I went through that process, but just to recap on the playbook, what we end up doing basically is it's a collaborative process of working with you to understand where you've been, where you are, and where you want to go. And then thinking through where you have gaps. Those gaps, by the way, could be process gaps. Those gaps could be you don't have the resources in-house to get the job done. Those gaps could be that you don't really know what's in those markets. So you may blindly be going into a market, but not know the market so that you can figure it out. So maybe having some buyer intelligence or market intelligence is going to be important. but really understanding those gaps and then being able to, in a very capital efficient way, address the gaps and then get through that. So this is about helping you achieve your success in 2024. So let's talk a little bit about what we could as far as next steps. So here's some next steps that may make sense from your perspective. One is discussing with you your strategy and revenue growth goals for 2024 and beyond. And by the way, we don't charge for this. We're more than happy to follow up with you, discuss this, discuss best practices. You may be at the point where you say, I really need a playbook. I need to put in place a playbook and I need to have a blueprint on how I'm going to succeed and grow. Or you may say, as I said earlier with that analogy as far as the fire truck, you may be saying, I've got a 5-alarm fire over here and I really want to start here to see how to address that. But let's figure out what makes sense from your perspective in terms of 2024 and figure out how to address that. Here's the contact information for myself and for Craig and Dale McConnell, who's also a partner in our company. We'll be following up with everybody that attended our webinar today, making sure you get the best practices and the follow-up that you look at, and then also understand if you'd like to set up an appointment with us to move this conversation for 2024 further. So again, thank you everybody for joining today's webinar. On behalf of myself, Craig, Dale, and the entire On-Demand Advisors team, I'd like to thank you for joining us today. I want to wish you a very successful, prosperous, and gratifying 2024. We'd love to contribute to your success this year and beyond. Have a great day.